Is there any archaeological evidence that Semitic people like Joseph were in Egypt and even ruled it? The answer is a definite yes. The Hyksos ruled Egypt for 200 years. We know these shepherd kings or pharaohs were Asiatic or Semitic, like the Jews and Mesopotamian people. We know they were Semitic because of the artwork depicted of these pharaohs and by their names. Also by the gods they worshipped and by archaeological architecture they left behind. The Hyksos may have been Amorites, Assyrians, or Hurrians, but they are definitely the same race as the Jews, and there is evidence of Baal worship that the Canaanites practiced in Egypt of this time. The Egyptian god Set is based off Baal. These were not Jewish pharaohs, but were relatives of the Jewish people, like the Amorites, Edomites, and Moabites. During the Shepherd King dynasty, we also see the rise of a vizier that governed Egypt. Near the end of the reign of the Shepherd Kings is likely when Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers into the hands of the Egyptians. The Shepherd Kings were ruling Lower Egypt and the Nile Delta and the north. Upper Egypt is called upper due to elevation, not north and south. Confusing, I know. Having a vizier that was only second to Pharaoh to aid in leadership was common during the reign of these foreign rulers. The reason why Egypt is a breadbasket, despite being in a harsh desert with almost no rainfall, is because of the Nile River, which inundates its banks and overflows every year and fertilizes the surrounding area, and also providing it with plenty of water to sustain crops. Not to mention also the many fish that the Nile River provided to the Egyptian people. This is a perfect place to sustain people with an abundant food supply. And you could always count on Egypt having food and grain despite drought and even famine throughout other countries. It seems God put ethnic relatives of Abraham in control of Egypt for a short time so he could graft his chosen people into the breadbasket of the ancient world. The more food a civilization had, and the more stable it was, the more quickly the population could explode, even if it was an oppressed population. I think God allowed them to be slaves so the Israelites don't become attached to the region. If Israel is not oppressed, there would be no reason for the Exodus and no conflict that proved God was above every Egyptian god and every other god. God makes an example of the Egyptian gods because Egypt was the most powerful, fabulous civilization of the world during this time. The more powerful a nation was, it was believed in this polytheistic world, the more powerful their gods were. God shows his omnipotent power in the story of Exodus and this age of many gods by mocking the Egyptian gods completely and displaying their powerlessness to stop him and Moses. God is attacking this age of many gods in the story of Exodus, and he mocks Egyptian mythology while he does it. I'll show how later on when I cover the book of Exodus. After the Hyksos were kicked out of Egypt, there would be reason for the Egyptians to hold prejudices against any remaining Semitic people, as we read about in the story of Exodus, and cause the Jewish people to be slaves by the Egyptians. The Egyptians make the Jews slaves because they are terrified these foreign people may take control of Egypt later in the future again. The Jewish people shared ethnicity with these foreign rulers, and that made them a threat because they might join in rebellion to reestablish the Shepherd King dynasty over Egypt once again. In the meantime, God will use a young man, Joseph, who is sold into slavery by his brothers to rule Egypt and save the surrounding nations and his family from starvation. Joseph is an unlikely savior in our story, just as Jesus was, and they share many similar life events that shape their lives. The story of Joseph all points to the greater and eternal salvation found in Jesus Christ. There are over 100 similarities between the story of Joseph and Jesus, according to many biblical commentators. I'll be covering the story later on. Meantime, I am Brian Cornelius, the founder of The Lion and the Lamb, and hope you have enjoyed my video and have learned something interesting and new. And I hope you watch my next video about Joseph, which all points to Jesus. Thanks for watching.